So, something very interesting just happened in the manga sphere, and we need to talk about it. And the thing we need to talk about is the fact that Black Clover might very well have just pulled off something that I never thought was really possible. It might have just beat Jujutsu Kaisen in terms of logic and interest. And before we begin, please be sure to subscribe to the channel so I can keep bringing you more anime information, and leave the possibility open for having a like, because this video is actually going to be more interesting than it might sound at first. Okay, so the baseline here is that we just got our first new chapter of Black Clover that we've gotten in months because, Yuki got a break and then there was some development. He had to write, the next sets of stories. And we've been keeping up with Black Clover for what it was then, and then we also been keeping up with Jujutsu Kaisen. Jujutsu Kaisen has actually been probably the least affected of any of the mangas due to pandemic scheduling, and then, the break schedule that they've had mangaka on because they're not getting enough breaks. But it's been really interesting watching Jujutsu Kaisen's story over the last couple of weeks, and then watching Black Clover come back, because there's a couple of interesting things we can infer from this, and probably a couple of videos we'll get out of this. But the one that's most interesting to me is that for something that was usually looked down upon by a vast majority of manga readers and anime fans, I think Black Clover has successfully overtaken Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, I know that sounds really weird because, it's apples and oranges, they're so drastically different, but they are shonen, and they're shonen within the same generation, so we do often draw comparisons. I think here, though, the comparisons are especially apt. Both are within their final battles. Both are in fairly similar situations where we have most of our cast all together. They're in a hopeless situation against a vastly overpowered opponent. And while you could say that is true for a lot of manga in their final arcs, it's especially true here because both of these have really been leaning hard on we have our cast all together. Not all manga, like Naruto's ending, did not necessarily stack all of the ninja in the same area, so you didn't always draw that comparison. I think because of that, when we look at these two now, especially, even looking, we go over to My Hero has been fairly careful to at least keep its battle 2 or 3 separate areas. That's not really the case with either of these. I mean, yes, there are multiple areas in Black Clover, but be honest, it really comes down to where they were trying to get Asta back and the castle town. And then on the flip side, you have Jujutsu Kaisen, which was trying to split itself off between the battle with, Fate Geto, which nobody cared about, and then the battle with Sukuna, which everybody cared about. But here's the really interesting thing. Black Clover is the only one that has successfully provided a way for its characters to win. See, I think it's perfectly fair to say that if you'd asked any reader of both of these series, and a reader who especially liked both of them, which one had the better setup for its characters, I think, honestly, Jujutsu Kaisen probably would have won. Even if you were a bigger fan of Black Clover, Black Clover's magic system has always been a very, large swings. Large swings in terms of the power system. Everybody has a lot of overpowered nature. It never delved too much into training for it or the nature of how characters could outwit each other. That just wasn't usually a factor. If that didn't make it bad, it still had cool battles, cool magic. It just wasn't a big factor in it. And then, Jujutsu Kaisen did. Jujutsu Kaisen shared a lot of similarities to, really, Hunter x Hunter. And Hunter x Hunter was a big draw in that regards, because you had very tactical fights. People really built their skills and abilities based around themselves. And I think because of that being such a big inspiration was a big draw in Jujutsu Kaisen. And it applied all the way throughout everything, including, culling games. Unfortunately, post-culling games, in a post-culling games Jujutsu Kaisen, the power system no longer functions the way it used to. It does not matter how hard you train, it does not matter your skill set, it does not matter what your abilities are. We live in the era now in Jujutsu Kaisen of two things. We live in the era of plot armor, and we live in the era of drastically overpowered characters. That happened from the moment they unsealed Gojo, and unfortunately, the series has just never gone back, and will it at some point? Maybe, but by God, until it does, it's just not that interesting. This was a series that was best defined as the conversation between Megami and the guy who burned receipts. What a sorcerer is a con artist. And that's true even before that line was ever said. A lot of Jujutsu Kaisen always focused on your cleverness in battle, not necessarily your overwhelming strength. But It's just that way with Sukuna. They are only focusing on strength. There is no clever strategy. And if they do win against Sukuna, and again, keep in mind in this series there is no guarantee of that, it will be random. It will be an item, it will be something else that will have come out of nowhere. If it comes down to, like, I and others have theorized that Kugisaki is still alive and she arrives with a special grade item of some kind to help, it will not have had proper setup. And that's unfortunate for a series that always did really well at teasing artifacts and ideas and building things up and always having its ground layout there. It's not there anymore. And unfortunately, I just think that that's a great loss. Conversely, Black Clover honestly is building on the same things it always had. The elemental / specific category magic system now effectively being augmented by, Asta's anti-magic. But that's simply a factor that's always been there. A lot of people got really mad when it was originally unveiled, but Asta's anti-magic has always interacted differently with magic. It's never been straight cancellation. It never has been. And so combining that factor with other people's magic that he has a strong connection with makes sense. We've seen other mages, give each other mana. We've seen them have interesting magic, combination magics, and it applies. And most importantly, what it really does for the series is it gives the characters a way to win. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. We are distinctly aware that the bad guy will have many more tricks up his sleeve, but it gives the characters a solid way to win. And it doesn't feel like it was pulled out of nowhere because it still fits within Black Clover's magic system. So, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, Black Clover actually pulled one over on Jujutsu Kaisen. Why don't you let me know what you think about that in the comments? I'm sure I can guess what you think of it, but go ahead and let me know anyway.